Hello YouTube! In today's video we're going to be discussing the trend of the winter arc, which if you're a young man, I most likely don't have to explain to you. But if you're my age and you're out of the loop, a winter arc is essentially spending the months of October, November and December focusing on yourself. So going to the gym, maybe engaging in self-improvement via the conduit of literature or meditation. All things that on paper are great. This is not the topic of this video. I'm not going to tell you that it's a waste of time or that I'm not glad to see that young men are interested in self-improvement in the first place. My issue rather is that I think that the winter arc reveals a lot about what modern self-improvement has become. Because to me, the culture around it nowadays is greatly flawed to the point that instead of actually leading people, young men, to reach their goal, it does the exact opposite. It leads to a lot of people giving up on their dream because what we call nowadays self-improvement is in reality a method that now starts to promote mediocrity, when in the past it was supposed to promote excellence. And the trend of the winter arc is the best example of that. So, if you are in the middle of your winter arc or if you are interested in self-improvement, I hope that this video is going to help you. I hope it's going to help you to avoid the pitfalls and not fall into the trap that many young men, unfortunately, are going to suffer from this cold season. So, the first thing that I want us to look at is the timing. It's very interesting to see that all of these movements of self-improvement, the no-faps, the resolutions, the winter arcs, they all take place during the cold months. That is not innocent. The reason for that is because the start of the year psychologically for a lot of people is a new beginning. So it's in a sense a time where you can reinvent yourself. This is the perfect moment to develop new habits and to become a better person. And this is why something like a winter arc in reality has always existed. I still remember as a college kid, as a high schooler, all of my friends would start to lift weights or do push-ups at home in December or in September or January at the start of the year, because everyone wanted to put on muscle, to become more jacked, to become more of a man. This is absolutely nothing new. This is nothing that we can blame on the Zoomers or Gen Alpha. They're just doing exactly what their ancestors, aka us, have been doing. What did not used to exist, however, is social media, because now this concept is hyped up to a great degree. And it's shared massively by people who are going to look at other people's winter arcs and be motivated themselves. So it's a concept that is as old as man himself that has been repackaged. And I think that it is the repackaging of the winter arc that makes it, in a sense, so damaging, because the truth is that this is very telling. The fact that you would need a winter arc, the fact that you would need to wait for October or September or January to start your revolution is the sign that you're essentially waiting for a sign of a divinity. You're waiting for a completely arbitrary event to occur to be able to say, okay, I start now. And that is an issue because in truth, if you really wanted to change, you would have started immediately. You wouldn't have needed a no-fap month or a winter arc month. If anything, this just shows that you lack discipline and you lack individuality, that you need to have this group around you to be able to make changes. And I'll get back to that concept because it's, of course, very important. Let's instead get back to the way the winter arc articulates itself, because it's 3 months. And that is also a huge issue. First, because it makes little sense. The cold season extends past December, so why stop there? Your winter arc should last until March. And in reality, it should expand even beyond that, because you should not have a winter arc. You should have a year-round arc. This is how you make the greatest changes in life. 3 months, everyone who has made these changes in their lives via the gym or self-improvement will tell you is nothing. It's not even the start of the start. You barely took the first step. And then what? You're going to take that first step and then stop? And I know that many people will tell me, well, you don't understand. The winter arc is to motivate people to get started. I understand that. I understand that logically you're supposed to continue afterwards. But how many people do? This is the problem with such hype. It generates it to a point where many people go into it and they never follow through. Look at all of these challenges, these like 30, 60, 90 days app challenges. Realistically, how many people start and how many people finish? If you want an answer to that, just look at the occupancy rate of most gyms. I'm friends with my gym manager and he tells me that if he gets 100 people to get a membership for the year, out of this 100, 20 will show up 2 months afterwards, and after 4-6 months, maybe 5. These people still have paid, they made a commitment, but they did not have what it takes to continue applying themselves. Now look at something like a winter arc, which is entirely free and touches many more people. How many do you think even go through the 3 months? I think that I'm not lying when I say to you that it's a minority, but okay, let's accept that. Let's look at this minority. What happens to them? Well, if they did their winter arc properly, most likely what they've done is they ingrain good habits that will continue past these 3 months. And these ones will get something out of their winter arc, which is consistency and discipline. And if you have that, you are already, in my opinion, exceptional. Because the majority of people, even people who go to the gym and who technically are self-improving, they don't really have that. You know, in France, it's always very interesting because if you ask a question to someone who lifts and you ask them, ça fait combien de temps que tu fais de la muscu? How long have you been lifting? You'll get people tell you 5, 7, 10 years. That is extremely common. So you have an overwhelming majority of men who have been training for 10 years. But their physiques don't correlate that. Why? Because in their brain, I've been training for 10 years means I've started 10 years ago. And that is a massive difference because to me, that does not mean you've been training for 10 years. If you start in 2010 and you train for 3 months until 2020, yeah, you've been training for 10 years, but look how much work you've done in that 10 years. In reality, these people should be saying, I've been repeating the same 3 months of fruitless training for the past 10 years, and there I am today with nothing to show for it because, and this is the sad reality of self-improvement, it is always easier to move downward than to move uphill. And so oftentimes 5-6 days of grind will be completely undone by a period of inactivity. And inactivity is exactly what the hype of the winter arc tends to produce. You are put into motion by this motivation, this energy that you feel, and when it dies down, you also die down, like a robot without batteries, because you never were self-motivated. You are motivated by something that was, in a sense, fed to you, and any external source of motivation, as we all know, cannot be sustainable. And this is my gripe with modern self-improvement, especially on the internet. It focuses a lot on promoting discipline on paper, but in reality, the way it does it just fuels people with empty motivation, which then also allows them to never build a discipline. And this is when we connect with what I was saying earlier about the need to feel to be part of a group. That to me is already a red flag that I see with the winter arc, because if you can only be motivated, if you feel like you're part of the pack because everyone else is doing it, and so you think, oh, it's so cool, I want to do it myself. Sure, as men, that's what we do. Like, we motivate each other. It's a form of competition. But there is also an aspect of it that I think is never pointed out. And it's that you needed others to start being serious about your fitness. And since, as I've established, the majority of these so-called others are going to drop out, you are also going to drop out. And this is what I find so amusing about all of these winter arc, Sigma, Chad, alpha male motivation edits you can find on YouTube. Because if you look at the type of concepts and themes that they always like to repeat, you're going to hear self-reliance, you're going to hear thriving in isolation, you're going to hear individuality, all traits that I value, that are extremely important, but they're promoted to a group that clearly isn't committed enough to the gym or self-improvement in the first place because they need that type of weird preachy mantra to even get their asses in the gym in the first place. But yeah, if you click on these videos, this just shows that you're very permeable to suggestion and therefore not really self-reliant, not really an alpha, sigma, male, chad, whatever the fuck. Actually, you are the exact opposite. So it's videos that are aimed at people who are not that, trying to make them become that, but their nature and value in themselves, their intricate, intrinsic value makes it so that they cannot provide that. Try to find logical reason behind it, there is none. It's all about consuming. But to be more specific, because I think that this is a little bit vague, I want to speak, for example, of someone by the name of David Goggins, that I'm certain if you are having a winter arc, or if you like self-improvement, you've heard about. Because I've heard about him myself. I've listened to him talk for hours and hours, and the guy is, yes, an inspiration, absolutely. But if you look at the way he preaches discipline, you might have noticed that there is something very weird about it, and that is the fact that he oftentimes says that the only people who need outside motivation are the people who will never make it. And I agree. And he makes a point to say that he himself has become the man that he is, an overachiever, because he is self-motivated. He never needed anyone else to scream at him, he would scream at himself. He is his worst critic. And so when he tells young men and he teaches young men how to become that, he tells them, you also have to become that for yourself. But at the same time, we're also talking about a man who became famous because he was motivating the masses. And he even took it a step further because he became like a professional motivator, where actual rich, famous people hired a guy to live with them so that he would kick their asses off at 3 a.m., take them out on a run, etc., etc. And this is what the irony is, because these people are essentially outsourcing their motivation by hiring him instead to do that for them. And you are, in a way, in the same boat. Because when you click on these motivation videos, you do the same thing. You don't really pay for it with your money, but you pay for it with your time. You are actively allowing an outside source to become your motivation and to, in a sense, do the work for you. And if you followed the trend of the winter arc, you also did that. I know it's not pleasant to hear, but in a sense, you are a follower. You needed someone else to tell you about the potential winter arc where you could have just come up with that yourself. I know that I have, and millions of men have. You wake up one day and you realize, I want to change, and this becomes your winter arc, and it never ends. For me, my winter arc was a summer arc. 2 months in my life that completely transformed me, body and soul. But I am almost certain that if back then social media was a thing and I was motivated to do my summer arc by someone else, it would not have had the same result because of the origin of the motivation behind the transformation. Now, I don't say that to say that I'm better than you or I have it figured out, because this business of motivation clips is as old as the platform. It's always been on YouTube. So when I was your age, when I was 16, 17, I was already doing that. I remember waking up at 6 a.m. every morning because I wanted to go to the local park to jog or sprint. And I couldn't get my ass out of bed unless I was listening to a very specific clip. And that clip is called Rise and Shine. I might have listened to it 100,000 times, but it was my only way to get motivated. And at some point, my dear mom, who I salute if she's watching this video, one, she was pissed because the motivation speaker would wake her up because I would listen to it in the bathroom without earphones like an asshole. And two, one day she told me, hey, if you need someone else to scream at you through the phone to go out and run, are you even motivated? Or are you just a puppet that has no willpower? She was right. It didn't feel good to hear that. It made me feel pathetic, but at the same time, it opened my eyes and I realized, wow, this is actually counterproductive because I'm entirely dependent on media. Without media, I cannot stimulate myself to do something. And if you look at yourself, if you're like that, you must recognize that there is an issue with that. Because if I told you about anything else, like for example, if I told you, if you cannot take this substance, then you cannot train. You would tell me, well, that's an issue. I'm now addicted to the substance and it limits my ability to train. It's the same. And this goes for people who take pre-workout or caffeine. If you can only train if you're hyped up on stimulants, to me, your relationship with training and self-improvement is soiled. Because if something is good for you, you should be able to find a reason within yourself without outside motivation to do the thing. And if you need that motivation at the start to get you going, okay. But if it becomes a crutch, to me, you're never going to be what these videos tell you to be, which is someone who is independent. And that is the part of self-improvement that to me is missing in these winter arcs, which is the spiritual. It's not just about the body, it's not just about action, it's also about finding out why you're doing this thing in the first place. What is your why? That to me is the most important part of the journey. It's figuring out your why. Once you have that, you're indestructible. But if your why is because it's my winter arc, then you understand that this is not a why. It's what we call a tautology. It's just a circular argument that goes nowhere. Because as I said, once that's over, well, your why also disappears, and so now you have no motivation. So in truth, the goal of a winter arc shouldn't necessarily be about improving at all. Not even about putting on muscle or about, becoming a more confident man. The goal of a winter arc should be finding out your why. And this is the part of self-improvement that is also lacking. The spiritual part of self-improvement is contained in the self. People are very good at the improvement part, the physical, but the self, It seems to be lost. It seems to be missing. And I don't blame people for that, because the people who promote self-improvement don't want to promote that part. Because you cannot sell that part. It's not a sexy part. And if anything, it's going to make them less money. And I'm going to explain to you later why. But I must insist on this part because I know who these winter arcs appeal to. It's mostly teenagers and young men. And that is normal, it's part of your evolution. You're at the part in your life where you're desperately trying to stand out and to become special, but at the same time, it's also when you're the most receptive to peer pressure. And that might be the thing that prevents you from finding an identity, because what might happen instead, and happens to many young people unfortunately, is that you're just going to download a personality online. And that's not you. That's not yourself. And that's not even necessarily an improvement, because you won't be true to yourself. But the amount of years you can waste on that bullshit is too many to count. But to go back to this idea of the self, and the reason why self-improvement gurus are very happy to push that away, well, that's because the identity I just described to you that you can download, they're the ones who provide it. They're the ones who are going to provide it to you for a fee. And so obviously, they don't want you finding out who you are, because there is no money in it for them. The process would be too complicated. If you try to do that, which is something that I try to do on this channel, you start to make self-improvement into something that is completely in line with just the individual, that only the individual can figure out. And so suddenly I become unable to sell it to you, because only you can find it. I'm not going to get rich off of that bullshit. To give you an analogy to make you understand, these manosphere type influencers are the male equivalent of what makeup influencers are, but to girls. They sell you a reflection of your desire and of the person that you have been convinced by them you want to become. And the particularity here is very important. Not the person you want to become, but the image that they pushed on you, that they managed somehow to convince you is who you want to be. So in truth, they're creating clones. Not only do they not do their job properly because they don't help you find yourself, but worse than that, the self they help you find is just a shittier, downgraded version of themselves. Look at all of these schmucks with beards and cigars, whose idea of masculinity is essentially just accumulating material possessions and being a dick. And that is what you get. That is what you download. Where is the spirituality in this? It is non-existent. And it's the same with winter arcs. When I look at the majority of influencers who promote that concept, it's a bunch of teenagers whose values are not necessarily what you want out of life. Under capitalism, self-improvement is just like anything else, it becomes a commodity. So it's removed of its substance, the spirituality is completely taken out, and it's turned into a machine that maximizes profit. So if under capitalism, our goal in life must be to make money, because this is what the machine wants us to do, under the same system, a self-improvement method can only also turn you into someone who, miracle, wants to make money. And the worst part of all of this nonsense too is that you won't even get that, because modern self-improvement is a Ponzi scheme. The only people that benefit from it are the gurus that run it. They get rich off of promoting the idea of the grind, but it's not the grind itself that got them rich. It's the fact that they managed to sell it to you. Usually, if someone manages to become a millionaire by selling self-improvement, most likely the reason why isn't because they helped a million people, but because the method that they managed to sell was very attractive to millions of people. So the only thing they really managed to do is to improve the number of zeros in their bank accounts. But the amount of impact they had on people's lives is completely irrelevant, because that is not the point of a product. The point of a product is to sell and to be consumed as many times as possible, which also means that if the product is non-effective, then that is even better. And to demonstrate that, I want to talk a bit about the psychology of confidence. I personally define confidence as the innate belief that regardless of what happens to you, you will be okay. This quality is paramount for a man to possess, because once you have it, you can extend it to pretty much everything in life. So for example, talking to girls, you will not be afraid because the worst thing she can say is no. So she says no, who cares? You're okay, nothing can touch you, you're moving on. Sports. You're going to go for like a 5-rep max. Okay. Do you know you're going to succeed? No. But if you don't, who cares? You just failed. You can try again. That is confidence. The problem is that Modern online self-improvement tries to sell confidence as this ability that you can develop by just listening to endless tapes or endless influencers pumping you full of motivation, and that somehow you will essentially gaslight yourself into becoming confident if you do that long enough. But this never works, and it will never work for a simple reason. Confidence is a physical trait. It is your physical ability to achieve something that eventually convinces you that you are capable of doing it, and this is when the confidence sets in your brain. So it started with the body, and then it became a mental trait. But it can never skip that physical part. You cannot download confidence. It's not possible. And this is also true with habits. Any video that is trying to teach you how to develop habits, that is not essentially telling you, shut down the video and go do the thing, is a shit video. Just look back at what Aristotle used to say. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. So it's not enough to hear about the thing, or to get hyped about the thing, or to do the thing once, or even for 3 months. You have to be able to do it always. It is in the forever that confidence is built. But I think you understand at this point why self-improvement gurus don't want to promote that type of mindset. It's because if you do that, if you start to engage in this physical repetition, well, one, you become less available to consume media, and two, what will eventually happen is that you'll come to realize that you didn't need media in the first place, that this consumption of media was taking time away from what mattered, that the media was actually even maybe detrimental to your growth because it served as a distraction. And this is the nature of consumerism. You consume to forget yourself. Self-improvement should be the opposite. Self-improvement should be spending time with the self to become the self. And I actually have a quote from Guy Debord that perfectly explains this. The more he identifies with the dominant images of need, the less he understands his own life and his own desires. The spectacle's estrangement from the acting subject is expressed by the fact that the individual's gestures are no longer his own. They are the gestures of someone else who represents them to him. So if I were to go line by line, here, the more you identify with all of these winter arc type of media, all of that self-improvement type of media, the less you become able to find your own path towards these very own things, because you start to live it through someone else. And their desires become your desires because you download them to the point where you become estranged from your own body and from your own soul. Your gestures are no longer your own, they are someone else's. And this is the nature of spectacle. This quote comes directly from The Society of the Spectacle, a book that essentially criticizes modern society as a whole because we now live in a world of smoke and mirrors, and the majority of people are just looking at life instead of actually living. I greatly encourage you guys to go read that book in French if you can, because it's the original language, and if English, if it's the only language that you speak. Eventually, I will cover it on the channel because it contains so many themes that are dear to my heart that are massively important if your goal is to improve as a man or as a woman. But that was the part for the mindset of the winter arc, which is the most important in my opinion. What about the physical aspect? Well, sadly, the two are equally as bad because the two, as you understand, are connected. Now, I'm going to run you through a list of reasons that make it so that if you embarked on your lifting journey during a winter arc, most likely you're going to make a bunch of mistakes, and you most likely will be able to recognize yourself in the list that I've prepared. So, the first issue with the winter arc and the gym is that it encourages what I call PR culture. PR culture is defined by the obsession over numbers that leads young lifters to focus only on progressive overload and pushes them to always try to add more weight to the bar, even if it comes at the detriment of technique and of volume. Now, any lifter that is intermediate or advanced will tell you that this is a massive mistake, a mistake that we all make. The problem is that since you only have these 3 little months to be able to progress, well, what you want is insane progression to be able to say, this winter arc, I boosted my squat by 40 kilograms. Great. If it's not sustained, or if it leads to injury, or if it leads to plateaus, all of that was for nothing. It is the tale of the turtle and the hare. The goal is not to sprint to the finish line because there is no finish line. A turtle is always going to beat the rabbit in the game of lifting. Always. This shit is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But that's a reality that is going to be hard to see. Maybe even for you after watching this video, you might tell yourself, fuck that guy, he's wrong. Why? Because you have seen examples of winter arcs that were showcased to you where this did not happen. Well, the guy who was 17, 18 just lifted all types of weights and blew up. But here's the reality. That guy was either a genetic freak or he was on a bunch of drugs. And this is the spectacle that Guy Debord was talking to us about. This is what you are shown. Then there is the reality. There's the other side of the screen. There's all of these spectators that are the overwhelming majority that are looking at this. And what does it do for them? Well, it is simply going to alienate the fuck out of them because you're going to become estranged from your own experience because this will not be what you will experience at all. Either because you will find that your results are not going to be as great, and so it's going to completely undermine your enthusiasm, which is stupid because it's self-improvement. You're not supposed to live it through someone else. Or even worse, you're just going to replace the practice of training with the action of it. Look at how popular these videos are. You're not going to tell me that the majority of people who watch them actually train. And this is what breaks my heart in truth. Fitness on social media has become for spectators. It is no longer something that people do, it's something that people consume. And I absolutely hate it. I hate the fact that the bubble keeps growing, that I'm supposed to live in this world where everyone is going to get jacked, everyone is going to become serious about physical fitness, then I go to a gym and I'm the biggest guy there. How is it fucking possible? Why are the majority of young men that I see not training seriously on their fucking phone, 160 pounds, not pushing themselves? Why? Well, because of what I just said. We have replaced the practice of self-improvement with the consumption of it. So now no one does it. Notice how every single perversion of self-improvement ultimately stems from what I just described, from an attempt at turning it into a spectacle. And that leads to what I just explained, where on the internet, the standards are all the way the fuck there, and you're going to be called DL if you're not 240 with like 20 inches arms, and then there's the reality. And the reality of the flip side of this spectacle is the exact opposite. Well, people are getting weaker and smaller, which is explained by the fact that modern self-improvement culture is centered around creating spectators. It is not creating people that actually do. It does not need people to actually do, because if people become actors, then they no longer consume. They're no longer spectators. So it's actually a good thing for self-improvement gurus that you stay small, weak, and undisciplined, because that way, you keep consuming their bullshit. Now, what I will never blame you for is your urge to progress and to become better as a man, because that is always commendable. But I have to warn you against the fact that these same urges can be used to manipulate you into becoming the type of person that is never going to act on them. And that is what this video is supposed to prevent. Because now that you've watched it, you should be better prepared for these manipulations, and your winter arc, which should extend past winter, should be successful. But that's all I had for you guys today. I'm going to leave you with that. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, you can do so. First link in the description, it's the coffee page. You can pledge $3 a month, and that's tremendous for me because it allows me to keep making videos. I'm now going to go to the gym. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.